Welcome and thank you to hopefully 2 hours fun-filled talking about winning at teaching without beating your kids. And I'm not just talking about corporal punishment, although we could address that a bit. I always marvel when I see a parent of a 5-year-old going, "Don't you ever hit your brother anymore." Because what it says is if you're bigger, you can hit. Or find somebody smaller, which is exactly what the kid has done. A younger brother, a younger sister, the cat, the dog, or whatever. But what I'm talking more about is the power struggles you and I as educators get into with the students that we have, and power struggles we indeed lose. I learned a long time ago that you can't control anyone who's bigger than you or has a bigger mouth. And that can occur quite literally at any age. Just ask a kindergarten teacher about that. But years ago, long before I had my own children, I thought one of my jobs in education was to get kids to mind. And I had this 5-and-a-half-year-old teach me differently. He would not sit in his seat. So I tried all the be nice things that you're taught in your methods courses. You know, "Jeffy, please sit." "Jeffy, look how nicely Susie's sitting." "Jeffy, I'll give you 5 stars if you sit." "Jeffy, the principal's coming in. Please sit." Nothing worked. So I tried the more direct approach. "Sit." And the kid looked at me and he said, "Make me." 5-and-a-half. So I walked over to that kid and I set him down. He leaped up. Walked back over the kid and did something I would never do to him today. I sat on him. And I said, "There, now you're sitting." And he looked up at me and he said, "As soon as you get up, I'm getting up too." And what he taught me was you really cannot make any kid do something they choose not to do. What you can do, though, is make it more comfortable for them to choose an appropriate activity, a whole lot less comfortable for them to choose an inappropriate activity, allow them the choice. But as important as allowing them the choice, we need to allow them to experience the consequences for the choices they made. Unless, of course, those consequences are life-threatening or morally threatening. I mean, you do have to intervene if it's life-threatening. You can't line little preschoolers up and say, "Now, if you run out in the street, you're going to get hit. Johnny, go show them." See, I told you what would happen if you ran out in the street. No, you get in trouble for that. But most decisions we give kids are not life-threatening or morally threatening. We do another interesting thing to kids. We say we want them to be responsible, caring, loving individuals who know how to think, not just what to think. But from the time they're this big, we say to them, "Think for yourself, think for yourself." Kid, would you listen to me? Think for yourself. Don't forget your coat and mittens. Think for yourself. Don't you have an exam you're supposed to be studying for? Think, if you'd have put your shoes in one place, we wouldn't be looking for them now. How many times do I have to tell you to think for yourself? And kids spend the first 2 years of their adult life trying to get their heads on straight. Because what we have done is taught them what to think, not how to think. And it is critical today that we teach this next generation how to think. In fact, there are 3 things I believe we must give them to buffer them from sexual promiscuity, drug abuse, and suicide. Now, those are the 3 big concerns for all of us who work with adolescents. But the buffering doesn't start in adolescence. It has to start much younger. And the 3 things I believe we must give each one of our students is 1, I like myself. 2, I can think for myself. And 3, there is no problem so great it can't be solved. Well, folks, they'll never get those last 2, I can think for myself, and there's no problem so great it can't be solved, unless from the time they are quite young, we give them the opportunity to solve some of their own problems. So one of the first things I would ask you as educators to do is the same thing I ask parents to do, and that is to look at what responsibilities and decisions are yours and what ones are your students'. Now, we do an interesting thing here. Kindergarten teachers will have a list this long of all the things they'll let those little kids do. Get the kid in junior high or middle school, we tend to reduce the list. When our goal should be, from the day they enter our schools until they graduate, we have a plan in that system to constantly increase responsibilities and decision making, not decrease it, so that when they do leave our schools, they're making most of their own decisions and truly responsible for all of their own behavior. But we have to make that happen. I'd like you to think about it. Now, we have people here who are from kindergarten through grade 3, 4 to 6. My favorite group, the junior high or middle school years, also known as unable to be an adult, unable to be a kid, and wanting to be both, and high school. Now, high school is where I've done my most work. Junior high is my favorite group. Lunch duty is my favorite duty. So that ought to attest to my sanity or lack of. But I have to tell you, my lectures changed dramatically after I had my own kids. It is amazing the kind of credibility they force on one's life. We have a 15-year-old daughter, Anna, a 13-year-old daughter, Maria, and an almost 12-year-old son, Joseph. And they've taught me a whole lot about parenting. In fact, somebody once told me that parenting is the one profession that when you finally get good at it, you're unemployed. And I believe that. And I am not a perfect parent. I say to my kids, you're so lucky you don't have a perfect mother. One day my oldest said, you're so lucky you don't have perfect kids either. It's a whole lot easier that way. And if you think it's difficult being a parent and a teacher, try being a parent and a teacher, lecturing on both, and having your children attend the lectures, and then hold you accountable for everything you said. My oldest once said to me, how come you don't always do what you tell other people to do? My youngest, I was in Toronto and doing a keynote address for teachers, and after the address, Joey and I got in the elevator. He looks up at the teachers that are in the elevator and he says, do you want me to be good or bad? I said, Joseph! And he said, well, they want to see what you're going to do either way. Yeah. I am not a perfect parent. I am also not a perfect teacher. But I do let my own children at home make lots of decisions, just as I let my students make lots of decisions. But they didn't get to make them all any more than you're going to turn a school over to ninth graders. When Joey was little, I didn't say to him, do you want to go to bed or not? That was not a decision a 3-year-old was going to get to make at our house. But I did say, do you want to go to bed now with your red pajamas or now with your blue pajamas? I mean, that's a decision a 3-year-old can make, right? He shows up red bottoms, blue top. It is not life-threatening, it is irritating. But it is not life-threatening, so you let it go. He's getting ready for preschool. We say, here's 3 outfits, pick one. A preschooler can choose from that. But when they get older, you don't say, here's 3 outfits, pick one. You increase responsibilities and decision-making. Maria, here's your school clothes, here's your play clothes, pick something from your school clothes. And regularly, my middle daughter shows up with a layered look. All school clothes, definitely layered. Gymnastics day, green tights, green leotards, red knickers, white socks that go halfway between the knicker line and the ankle so the green tight sticks out, high top shoes, no laces. I have no idea if or how they stay on her feet all day. Oversized shirt, bigger is better, red, green, yellow, and blue stripe. Green, of course, not matching the green in the leotard. Half sleeves so the leotard sticks out. I mean, the kid looks great. Now, I know a lot of parents who would say, go pick out an outfit and then gasp when the kid walked down the stairs. You can't wear that one. Now, it is not life-threatening to kid. It is painful to parent. But it is not life-threatening to kid to wear the layered look. You let them go. It's like kids with shoes on the wrong feet. If they hurt, they'd move them. But we worry, worry, worry. You know, I have yet to see a senior with shoes on the wrong feet. But we should spend an awful lot of their early childhood worrying about it. No, you let them go. My 15-year-old, she's been picking since she was 2.5. We don't say, here's 3 outfits, pick one, here's your school clothes, here's your play clothes. She has been through all that. We just assume by 15 she can go out and pick out an outfit that's appropriate. Junior high, though, we tend to start over. Here's 3 outfits, pick one. Those poor kids. I don't know how many junior high parents have come up to me and said, would you look at this kid? He was such a good kid. He was so well behaved, so well mannered, so well dressed. Now look at him. And I look at the kid and I get to know the parents. I say, you know what? He hadn't changed. They go, what? He hadn't changed. From the time he was little, he dressed the way you told him to dress. He acted the way you told him to act. He said the things you told him to say. He's been listening to somebody else tell him what to do. He's been doing it. He hasn't changed. He's still listening to somebody else tell him what to do. Problem is, it isn't you anymore. It's his peers. The kid hasn't learned how to think. Are any of you raising a strong-willed child right now in your lives? That's why I came, right? Let me tell you something neat about a strong-willed child you may not fully appreciate yet. They are truly easier on us as adults when the kid is in the older teen years than a compliant child is. But if you think about it, it makes sense. You see, compliant children are very easily led when they're little for 2 things: approval and to please adults. They are just as easily led in the teen years for those same 2 things: approval and to please their peers. Now, strong-willed children, if you can get them up to puberty with both of you still excited about life, are never easily led by anybody. First by you, but you know what? Also not by their peers. So I want you to go home and give that kid a great big hug and say, I knew there was a reason we were getting you up to puberty. You see, we want kids who know how to think, not just what to think. I got in a lot of trouble. I went from secondary teaching to elementary crisis teaching. I was in crisis. I had parents on my case regularly because I refused to tell upper elementary kids in Colorado to put their coat and mittens on. And I would say to them, why do you wear your coat and mitten? And they raise their hand, because your mother said so. I said, no, no, no. And they said, well, because you'll catch pneumonia. I said, that's not true. And it is not true. Don't lie to kids when you're teaching them how to think. I'll bet you've seen kids who never bundle up, who much to your dismay are never absent. Those kids are always in school. They never get sick. And then there's other kids whose parents wrap them up, bundle them up, warm the car up, drive them directly to school, send a note, don't let them go out, it's too cold. They have pneumonia half the winter. That is not why you put your coat and mittens on. Instead, I like to teach kids why. I hold up a hunk of frozen meat. I say, kids, look at this meat, it doesn't move, does it? It's kind of cold, isn't it? Now, feel your bodies, they're kind of warm, aren't they? Feel the heart, it's moving, isn't it? Now, you go on outside with your coat all buttoned up. There's a good chance all the warm air will stay in and your heart will keep moving. But should you go out with it wide open, or worse yet, no coat at all, there is a possibility. All the warm air could go out, the cold air could come in, and your organs could freeze. Heart, kidney, liver, solid, just like this hunk of meat. And the kids are going, oh. But you know what? You haven't lied to your kids. That's why you wear your coat. I say, but don't worry about it. Your body takes care of itself. It draws from the parts it can live without. Your hands will go first. And I show them white dots and black fingers and no fingers from frostbite, and the kids are going, ugh. I say, but that's why you wear mittens. Most kids leaving my classroom were making a decision on a regular basis not to let their organs freeze. Now, you want to see how ingrained that is in our culture? I'll bet some of you, the last time you went home to visit your own parents, now that you're a responsible adult, you're walking out the door and your mom says, don't forget to bundle up. I mean, you're 32 years old, don't forget to bundle up. Or you're walking out the door with your own children because now you are not only a responsible adult, you're a responsible parent. And your dad says, do you think you have the kid bundled enough? Think for yourself, but the underlying message is, you really ought to listen to me. About all I can do with you in the short time I have with you this evening is irritate you. But that's exactly what my goal is to irritate you. But I'd like to do it like an oyster does it. When it gets a grain of sand in its shell, it does one of two things. It makes a pearl or it dies. Hopefully you choose the former, but the choice is yours. I mean, I get really irritated at teachers that attend these kind of in-services. They go back and change everything. And the kids say, what'd she go to this week? You know, because everything changes. I don't want you to do that. But what I would like you to do tonight is irritate about things that are happening in your own classrooms that get in the way of teaching kids how to think. And one of the first things I'd like you to irritate about is the number of times you hear yourself saying, think for yourself, but the underlying message is, you really ought to listen to me. Another thing I'd like you to irritate about is the mini lecture. Now, you all know what a mini lecture is. That's information the kid already had. Got a kid outside, doesn't have his coat on. He's not freezing, that's life-threatening, you'd have to intervene, but he's very cold. Now, I could walk out there and mini lecture him. If you'd have put your coat on, you wouldn't be cold. He knows that. I want you to irritate from now on anytime you give any kid a mini lecture. If you'd have put your coat on, you wouldn't be cold. If you hadn't hit your brother, you wouldn't be up in your room. If you'd eaten everything on your plate, you could add dessert. If you'd have studied, you wouldn't have failed. But it's like my husband saying to me, if you hadn't put the car in reverse, Barb, we'd have 2 cars. Now, I don't need that kind of information while I'm getting on the city bus, any more than a kid needs to hear if you'd have put your coat on, you wouldn't be cold. Instead, I walk out there and say, hey, Joe, what's the matter? He says, I'm freezing. I said, well, how are you going to handle that? He said, I want my coat. I said, good thinking. The kid decides how to solve a problem he's created. You know as well as I do, you get a kid locked in a power struggle, you even suggest he put a coat on, he would freeze first rather than let you be right, especially if he's 13. He's not going to let you win that because you set it up as a contest. No, kid, you can handle it. I'd like you to take a critical look in your own classrooms at what responsibilities and decisions are yours and what ones do you truly give your students. And then I'd like you to sit down as a faculty and say, what is our plan? From kindergarten through grade 6, or the middle school years, or our high school. And if you're real gutsy, sit down as an entire district and say, do we have a plan from kindergarten through grade 12 to teach this next generation how to think? The next thing I'd like you to look at after responsibilities and decisions and mini lectures is, where are you coming from philosophically? I think one of the mistakes we make in education today is we do not require our new teachers to develop a philosophical foundation for teaching. Instead, at university, we give them maybe one philosophy course and a lot of methods courses. And we take a technique from here and a technique from here. If it's in a book, it's got to be right. And if an expert from afar, that's anybody over 100 miles, so I almost qualify here, comes in and says it'll work, then it'll work. Wrong. You have to take anybody else's techniques. Today you have to take mine. Bounce them off your own philosophical tenets. And if it won't bounce, I don't care who said it or what kind of research is behind it, don't use it. I have 2 basic tenets I'll bounce anybody's techniques off of. 1, kids are worth it. And I believe you've got to believe that, because I know you're not in teaching for the money, or somebody forgot to tell you something about other careers. Kids are worth it, and I will not treat a student in a way I myself would not want to be treated. If I wouldn't want it done to me, then I have no business doing it to a kid. But I'd like you to look at some of the dumb things we do to kids in school that we would never want done to us. Think of the last party you got invited to. Now, not one you had at your house, you had to have gotten invited to. You didn't have to earn that party, you just got an invitation. Now, your behavior may dictate you never get invited back to another party, but you didn't have to earn that party. But how many times at school do we make kids earn their parties? If you don't get your name on the board, you can come to the popcorn party. If you bring all your papers in, you can come to the popcorn party. You know the kid who needs the party the most? The kid who never gets to come to the party. And I believe we need to celebrate. How would you like if the next wedding you went to, they stopped you at the door and said, lesson plans aren't in this week. You get on home, get them done, and then come to the party. Think about it. But that's what we do to kids. I went to one school where we're going to have a party every Friday for every kid who didn't get his name on the board. And we're going to give them pop. I said, well, what do you give the kids who got their name on the board? Water. I said, isn't that a crime? In your school, you have to be bad to be healthy. Because we also teach them, if you do something good, we're going to feed you something sweet. Think about it. There's nothing wrong with having sweets in school. But it shouldn't be if you do something good, feed yourself something sweet. I had to go to school once because my son had done something that wasn't on the approved behavior list on a field trip. He broke the beaver dung jar at the Natural History Museum. Now, it could have been worse. It could have been an irreplaceable dinosaur leg. But it's a beaver dung jar. And I was real pleased when I got there how he and his teacher had handled it. He wasn't banned from the next field trip, but he had to replace the beaver dung jar, write a letter to the Natural History Museum, and he was allowed to go on the field trip if, and only if, he had a plan for how he was going to handle his hands, feet, and mouth creatively and constructively at the planetarium. You got a problem? What's your plan? Well, I'm walking out of the building feeling real good about how that was handled. In is walking my oldest, who was in 6th grade at that point. She's walking in with 6 other kids and the principal. All the science fair winners, as if winning wasn't enough, all the science fair winners got to go to Swenson's ice cream parlor for ice cream. Principal said, tell Mrs. C what you had. They went, we had nuts and fudge and whipped cream, and there's my daughter with her braces and little peanuts hanging out of them for the duration. And he said, tell Mrs. C what I had. And they went, orange juice. I said, what? He said, oh, my Weight Watchers counselor wouldn't approve of the ice cream. I thought, you turkey. For 13 years, we're turning my children over to this school system so they can learn 5.5 hours a day that if you do something good, eat something sweet. So when they get older, their Weight Watchers counselor can suggest orange juice instead. Think about it. Now, there's nothing wrong with having sweets in school, but don't bribe your kids with them. And celebrating. I have parties in my classroom, but you don't have to earn them. But so many of the kids are used to earning them. I say, kids, we're going to have a popcorn party. They say, how come? I said, well, because I like parties. What do we have to do? I said, show up. And you know when we have parties, when we need them? Have you ever had a week where if it could go wrong, it did? If it couldn't, it found a way? I have. And right in the middle of that week, I say, kids, I don't know of any other way to salvage this week but to celebrate a little bit and then start over. Another thing we do is we put kids' names on the board, and I know it works. But I don't say if it works, do it. I say if it works and a kid's dignity is intact, do it. Susie late, Jill tucked out of turn, Johnny forgot his pencil. I ask you, how would you feel if you showed up in the faculty lounge with your name on the board? Mrs. Jones late, Mr. Garcia, no lesson plans. Mrs. Smith didn't show up for duty. Think about it. If you wouldn't want it done to you, don't do it to kids. So take a critical look at where are you coming from philosophically. Kids are worth it, and I will not treat them in a way I myself would not want to be treated. The next thing I'd like you to look at is what is your goal in education? Are you there to empower and influence this next generation or control them and make them mind? Now, we often say that we want to empower and influence, but our techniques belie that. and very forcefully demonstrate that what we're out to do is control kids and make them mind. Now, the bummer about controlling kids and making them mind is you lose it once they get bigger than you. In fact, you and I are going to be in serious trouble if we make a major attempt to control this next generation. We're going to be in trouble when we end up in the old folks' home. And this next generation has learned, because we spent 12 years teaching them, how to control those weaker than them. And at that point, when we're in the old folks' home, those weaker than them will be us. You see, I won't do to a kid at 7 something I don't want done back at me at 70. Think about it. Our job isn't to control kids and make them mind. It's to empower them and influence them. And people often ask me, don't you believe in behavior mod? You bet I do. At university, I was trained in 6-cycle charting with rats. I believe in it. We modify and influence one another's behavior all the time. Y'all got up and walked out of here, you would influence my behavior. What we should not be in the business of doing, though, is manipulating another person's behavior. No one likes to be manipulated. Our job is to influence and to empower. You know your students influence you. I bet you've had groups of kids come through one time in your teaching career where you wondered what their parents drank during their pregnancy, because that entire group's different than any other group you've ever had. That 5th-hour class is different than any other class you have during the day. They influence the way you respond that day. And we influence them. But our job is to empower them, not control them. But power's like a candle with a huge flame. Your flame as an educator can light up every child you come in contact with and never be diminished itself. The beauty of empowering another human being is you never lose your own power in the process. In fact, all you have is a greater light to see by. In an old age, when ours starts to flicker, and it will, we're going to have this next generation's light to guide us. And we better hope it's a lot brighter than ours for what we're leaving them with. Look at it with the librarian. Kids come in. Librarian is standing there, and the kid says, my mom forgot to put my library book in my backpack. It's got to be somebody else's fault, right? We tend to think for the kid. We said, that's all right, hon, bring it tomorrow. We thought for him right away. Or we say, you can't check another one out to bring the other one back. That's control. I'm not out to control him, and I'm not out to think for him. Kid comes up to me and he says, my mom forgot to put my library book in my backpack. I say, oh, darn, how are you going to handle that? I don't know. Can I bring it tomorrow? I said, I don't know. Can you? What is your problem?